Welcome to Scatter Travel TV. This is Debbie Gerber. I am so glad that you've joined me today to visit one of my favorite places in the world, Rome, Italy. Before we get into Rome, let's talk about how we get to Rome. When we went to Rome, we flew in to the airport, and from there, to get to the downtown, we took a train. The train system is really well organized. It's easy to understand. There are always people there that are willing to help you if you need assistance figuring it out. The first thing that you need to know is that you have to buy a ticket to get on the train. There are two places to buy tickets. One is at the ticket office, which usually has quite a line. Most people that are in that line are there either because they don't know how to do it or they've got an issue. So that might take you a little while. The other option is to go to the ticket kiosk that's in there around in front of the train. You'll see people hanging around, getting tickets, and it'll be easy to find them. You go there and you would select your language first. Once you've selected your language, it walks you pretty much through the whole thing. If you have an issue of not knowing which train to take, make sure you ask someone and they can help you with that. There are what are considered the fast trains, and then there's the trains that make stops every stop. The fast trains will pass a lot of different stops and end up at only major stops along the way. So you want to make sure that you don't get on a fast train if your stop is in between its stops. So as long as you get that part figured out, and there are maps there that show the fast trains, the express trains, and the stops that they make, and then the ones that make every stop. It's a good idea to look at the map ahead of time just so that you can see how many stops you've got to go. Make sure you know the name of your stop, which will be both spoken and shown inside your trains. So you buy your ticket, and once you get your ticket bought, just be sure you know the time it's going to be there and what track, and there'll be big boards that show that. And then you need to get there, and you need to be there early because the train comes, it loads, and when it says it's time for departure, then don't wait. You've got to be on the train. So that is one caution. Trains are nice. They are comfortable. If you get a first class, you will be assigned a seat, and you'll have an actual seat to sit in. Now, when you go to the train and you load, there'll be trains where you walk up steps, and it'll be like an upper deck on the train. Those are first class. If you have bought a second class passage, which is cheaper, but it means that it's just general seating, you go and find a seat. And if there's not one available, you get to stand. If you go up in the first class section without a first class ticket, people will get angry because you're supposed to know that if you have a general ticket, which is a second class ticket, that you cannot sit in that first class cabin. So be sure that you're sitting in the right area. But that's one of the easiest ways to tell is that that's upstairs. You can take luggage on the trains. They have areas to put your luggage as you get on the train. And there's also overhead bins. So there's places to put your luggage. We took our luggage, loaded on the train, and headed to the downtown station in Rome, the main station. Once we got there, we had an option. We had rented an apartment because we were a group of 8. So it was much cheaper for us in Rome to rent an apartment than to rent different hotel rooms. So if you're looking into accommodations, that's one thing that you might really consider looking into is look at apartments because they were really quite reasonable and very nice. And we had a place that we could cook, where we could do wash, and it held all 8 of us. So we got to the train station, and then we had to make a decision. Do we walk to the hotel or do we take a taxi? Now, if you know exactly where the hotel is and it's close, or your apartment, it's easy to walk and pull your suitcases. It's okay. But if you're not sure where you're located or it's a ways out, then I would take a taxi the first time. You can always walk back to the train station, but you don't want to be lost, and it's easy to get a good taxi there, which we did. We took the taxi to the hotel or to the apartment. And then from then on, we did walk, but at least we knew right where we were at, and we had the taxi driver point out things and show us things along the way. The first thing we did when we got there to the apartment was just to kind of get a feel of the apartment, and then we went down to look and see what was in the area to eat. Did we have restaurants in the area? Was there a store? Was there a bakery? what was right in our immediate area, so that when we were out and about, we knew whether we could come back and eat there and have things to eat, or whether we'd have to eat before we came back. We found where we were at both a grocery store and several restaurants. There was a bidet in our apartment. That was kind of a fun conversation piece for a little while, but the apartment was nice. It was clean, and it overlooked a patio area that was really pretty. So you kind of had a patio area that looked down into the center area, like a little plaza in the middle of the apartment, which we enjoyed. Probably one of the main things that people go to Rome to see is the Colosseum. We went just before dusk the first night, and you had the beautiful sun setting and that coloring the sides of the Colosseum, and it was the most beautiful sight. I would suggest seeing it both in the day when you can go and tour it, and in the evening at sunset when it just reflects beautiful colors onto the Colosseum. And then a little later in the evening, there are some restaurants there you could eat at, and then see it in the evening when they've got the inside lighted. Each of those stages have their own ambiance. Colosseum is also, or was originally known as, the Flavian Amphitheater. It was later, they think, called the Colosseum because of the statue called the Colossus of Nero. It was made out of copper, and at some point was almost completely destroyed, probably taken down for the copper, as a lot of even the interior of the Colosseum had been ransacked and taken for use on other buildings. Once it had kind of stopped its usage. And then, but that there's just this little part of the statue of Nero left, that just a base part. So there's hardly anything left of that. What I want to tell you about is when you go through, and it is well worth it. You might look at it and say, ooh, do I really want to pay to go through it and stand in a line? Yes, you do. It is really an interesting place. I didn't really want to go because I don't like bloodthirsty things, and I just always thought of the gladiators and the killing of the Christian people there, and it just seems so mean and awful to me that I had a hard time going. But it was very, very interesting, some of the history of it. And then all of the interior, I had no idea that the interior had this labyrinth of layers of area underneath the floor where they would have these contests and these battles. There was places, almost like elevator shafts, where they would lift up the people up to the floor of the arena, or animals, whatever it was. And they would stage it elaborately with buildings and trees. And I mean, it was a major production. It wasn't just people got out there and fought. And they had these huge hunts for animals, and they had a huge variety of animals too that were used for that. A lot of different kinds of animals that were used, and they would do these huge hunts and then transport them there for that. So I was sad for the animals, and they have a lot of relics there from that, so you can kind of see that. One of the things that I thought was really interesting was how the seating was made up. You look at it and you wondered, oh, it's a huge amount of seating. But seating was kind of assigned. There was a tier for the senators. There was a tier place for knights to sit. And they kind of went up the scale. So those who sat on the bottom, like if you're going to a basketball game, the seats at the bottom are the premiums, right next to the floor. So anyway, they had different sections for them. They would have sections for wealthy citizens, poor citizens. They had sections for social groups that were like boys or soldiers or dignitaries that came from other places, priests, those kind of things. And as you went up the thing, at the very top layer that was actually for slaves and women. Don't get upset there, but that was for slaves and women. And what really interested me was the people that were totally not able to go there. If you were an actor, you couldn't go there. That you were considered even, I guess, below the slaves. So you weren't even permitted to go there. If you were a grave digger, an actor, or a former gladiator, somebody who'd already fought there, you weren't even allowed to go up in the seating. So I just thought that was really funny that there were people that actually were banned altogether from going. But like I said, there's a whole labyrinth underneath. So they had the floor, and then underneath they had like a hospital for those that were injured. They had the places for the animals. They had the places for trainers, and it was immense, because if they brought in animals, like let's say they brought in rhinoceroses and elephants and poor giraffes, tigers, lions, I mean, you name it. Like I said, ostriches were on the list that just made me sad. But if you're going to bring all that in, you'd have to have an extensive place to feed them and water them and take care of them. And, there was training areas. It was just huge, and it was all below the floor. It was underground. So it's a really cool thing, and you don't see that from the outside. You don't see any of those things. At one point, after the gladiators that era was over, it became almost a religious center. And during one period of time, there was executions of anyone who was Christian, and so they had this big campaign against Christians, and so there was a lot of murder done there. And now they go and they have these big crosses in there, and they even have times that they have the stages of the cross around the arena, and there's certain times of year that they have these religious ceremonies done there. And so there are times that it's used now for a religious purpose, which made me really happy. I was sad that it was kind of destroyed inside. A lot of the beauty of the building was taken and used in other buildings, like I said. But they are in the process right now of doing a major remodel or restoration of it. So, and then if you go around the building, so if you go out to the east and to the west of the Colosseum, across the streets, there are areas that were training areas and hospitals, and there was even an armory there. And you can actually see remains of those things still, partway standing, because they would have been built lower to the ground. And so actually excavated. They are in the process of excavating some of that stuff out. So go around the whole area. Another thing that is right there, the Ark of Constantine is right in that Colosseum area that's outside, which would have been, now we'd call it a parking area, but it was a great big area that surrounds the Colosseum, and the Ark of Constantine is there. It is a high monument, about 25 meters high. It was built in 350 AD to mark the victory of Constantine. So there is, like I said, a lot of history there. The Colosseum, I forgot to tell you, holds about 50,000 spectators. Now when they do ceremonies, because of the deterioration of the Colosseum, they limit it to about 100. So take a chance. Pay the money. Go inside. It is an experience, but if you're going to go inside, take a tour. Because, again, you'll just walk around an old building. And, yes, it's magnificent, but you won't have any of the history and any of the stories and know all of the different things that happened, like who sat where and where did the religious executions take and why, and where were the animals and where's the staging. For those things, you need to take a tour. So take the time to plan on taking a tour there. Now, you can get there. We got there by walking. This area is not real big. We can walk around. There's restaurants there in the area to eat. There was a fabulous Italian restaurant that we will go through and tell you about in the next video. So watch for part 2 of Rome. We will also be covering the Vatican and other areas in the part 2 of Travel to Rome. Thanks for joining us today. Be sure to visit www.scattertravel.tv. There you will find more shows for different places. You can use them to preview places that you'd like to go so that you have some idea of what you want to see, how long it will take, how to get there, a little bit of the history prior to going. That always makes your vacation more memorable and more meaningful. Join us again for Rome Part 2.